Hello. You are very welcome to today's show. Well Expo, here we are. Thursday lunchtime, 12 o'clock. Hopefully you have a cup of tea there with you to join in today. Now, today's guest, as I have said previously on the Facebook page, is absolutely no stranger to Well Expo and to our audience out there. Today, I am joined by Susi Lodola Psychotherapist, and she is waiting very patiently in what we will call the green room. And we are going to chat all things anxiety. Susi, thank you so much for coming on today and joining us. How are you keeping?
Not too bad, thanks very much. Working away and, trying to stay focused and getting through what we have to get through. So, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, but thank you so much for coming on today to talk all things anxiety. So first question is really, and I know like times have changed so much now, what is it?
Okay, what is anxiety, right? First of all, it's important to know anxiety is completely normal, right? We all get anxious because it's our alarm system. So in order to protect ourselves from danger, our alarm system goes off to make us either run for the hills or fight. So it's fight or flight, okay? So when your alarm system is faulty, then it means you get anxious for no apparent reason. So instead of being just anxious, say you hear a noise in the middle of the night and your heart starts beating and you get nervous and you go, oh my God, who's there? That's anxiety too. But that goes again once you establish, oh, there's no one here, whatever. But sometimes we get anxious for different reasons. So anxiety is really based, number one, it's future oriented. Okay, so we're thinking about stuff in the future. And secondly, it is, your overestimation of threat and your underestimation of the ability to cope with any situation. And then there's different types of anxiety. There's like two, if you categorize two, one is ego-driven, which is a threat against your person, that perceived threat, or it is non-ego, so it's catastrophizing. You have worry thoughts and you're thinking about the future, what could happen, what might happen. So these are type of, and you can have the two of them at the same time as well. And then you have different categories, as in health anxiety, OCD, general anxiety, panic disorder, phobias. That's all part of the anxiety family.
And the sensation of having anxiety, like I would be one of those people that would feel things a lot physically. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure it shows itself differently with different people.
Well, okay, so basically, you're right, Barbara. It manifests itself physically. It manifests itself physically. It manifests itself also in your behavior. And it also manifests itself in your head, what you're thinking. So it all happens together. So it doesn't really happen in isolation. So when you're saying physically, some people, it's different for everyone. So coming back to the fight or flight, okay? So as humans, we're designed in order to survive as a species, to run for the hills or fight. And in order to do that efficiently, our blood has to drain out of our head into the large muscle groups, which enables you then to fight harder, run faster. Your digestive system stops working to its full capacity because the body has to concentrate on running or fighting, so it stops. So some people get a funny tummy, they get a funny sensation. A lot of the time, people say to me, they can't eat. Your heart starts racing, adrenaline is being released. Your heart starts pumping like crazy. You might start sweating. Some people say they get a fuzzy head, they can't think straight. So these are all different manifestations, and everyone is different. What is it for you like, Barbara, if you don't mind me asking? How does it manifest for yourself?
Yeah, straight into the stomach.
Yeah.
Straight into the stomach. And it's one of those things, but I suppose for me, even trying to deal with it, it is that hang on. And I suppose maybe having the tools that I have now with coaching, I know the questions to ask myself as to how to get myself out, not get out of it, but to calm it or relax it or release it or find a logical explanation to myself as to Sure, why did you think that in the first place, and bring myself about? But definitely, yeah, my stomach, and it's and into the heart, and you feel the heart nearly is about to explode out of the chest.
Exactly. It's that constant thing. It's a constant beating of the heart. So this is how it manifests in the body. How it manifests in your behavior is you might start avoiding situations. So for example, as in social anxiety, you might stop going out, you stop meeting people, you may not put yourself forward in a job, that sort of thing. It might manifest itself in behavior like repetitive behavior, like in OCD. You know, you get intrusive thoughts and you think you have to do certain things in order to, you know, whatever reason you have sort of established for yourself why you're doing that behavior. And you might start fidgeting, tapping the foot, you know, being really nervous, biting your nails. So that's a manifestation in behavior. In your thoughts, it could be, oh God, you know, coming to COVID, you know, I don't know if you know, I'm feeling really anxious about having to go out again, or, you know, teenagers come back to school, they may feel anxious, they haven't really had much social interaction, they've forgotten what it's like, they might not feel self-conscious, so they might be anxious about that. So there's all different ways that the thoughts can make us anxious. It always stems out of your thinking in any case. All anxiety comes out of there. So, you know.
And that's funny, what you were saying there, of course, is, as you mentioned, COVID. So pre-COVID, pre all of this, you know, people said, yeah, I'm anxious over this, and I'm anxious over X, and I'm anxious over Y. Maybe it was easier to pinpoint what. Now, I'm not assuming it was, but it may have been more aware of what it was that was causing them the anxiety. But then we get into COVID, and at the beginning of COVID, everybody's going, well, hang on a second. What is it? We know nothing about it. This is, say, 12 months ago, what it is, what it's doing. We're all locked down. So then you have literally a whole nation, or globally, people, their anxiety levels coming up. And now we've had 12 months, give or take, of being locked down, and the anxiety of not knowing what's happening. And then if it opens up, how do we go out and mingle again? Do you know what I mean? So it seems nearly like anxiety, in a sense, has nearly turned on its head.
Yeah. It's that uncertainty. It's about, you know, not being able to tolerate uncertainty. Okay. So actually, I had a client yesterday, a young woman, and she was sort of saying, she's 20, and she said, you know, I'm so anxious. I was, you know, and she's both depressed and anxious, but she says, I was supposed to do my driver's license. I was supposed to get a summer job. All of these things that you would normally expect to do at 19, 20 in your college time. And she says, I can't do any of it. And I don't know when I'm going to be doing this. And it's bringing her really down and making her really anxious as well. And she's feeling it in her stomach, and she can't sleep, and she's restless and fidgety and snapping at people. And the thing is, the only way you can overcome the inability to accept uncertainty is to look at the things that you can do, the things that you can control, and make them really small as well. Because what can you do about the fact that we are locked down? Zero. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So we can't control it. So accepting that fact, first of all, we can't control this. We can also not control how the vaccines are rolled out and when they're happening and all of that buzz that's going on. Once you keep tuning into that, it's going to make you anxious. But if you can say, right, I can do my exercise in the morning, or I can go for my walk, or I can read a book, or, you know, that girl, for example, I said to her, well, what's actually good about this lockdown at the moment? And she came up with this huge list. It's like, oh, I don't have to get up in the morning early to go to college. I just roll out of bed.
I've heard that a few times with my guys too.
Whenever I want, I can talk to my friends on WhatsApp. Whenever I want, I can stay up later. I can do all of these things. So she's meant I can play my guitar more. I'm experimenting with my hair. So I said, well, how does that make you feel that you're actually now see all the things that you can control. She says, just that made me feel better already, rather than thinking of all the stuff you can't control. Okay.
And isn't that the habit? Because we automatically think of the negative, what I cannot do, what I can no longer do. But there has to be a way of people, you know, how do people then start to learn to come back to what they have here and now in that moment?
Okay, well, first of all, Barbara, a lot of people, they don't know they're anxious. Okay, it is really starting to, when you're starting to feel this inner unsettledness, this kind of antsiness inside you, you can't sleep, you're irritable, stomach pain, headache, then start to tune into that and ask yourself, well, this is hindering me from living my best life, basically. So then that's the first step, to realize, okay, maybe I need help. And another side issue here, the sooner you get help with anxiety, the better, because your amygdala in your brain, which is your emotional center, it recognizes your emotions and it learns to deal with it. And if you're ignoring this anxiety, the amygdala actually enlarges over time and your anxiety gets worse. So the sooner you treat it, the better and the quicker you're actually going to be helped. So that's a side issue. So then what you do is, I say to my clients is, some people come in and say, I'm anxious all the time. I'm anxious, wake up, go to bed, I'm anxious all the time. So the first thing is to really note down in a diary the times you're anxious, and you will very quickly notice you're only anxious certain times of the day. You're not all day. That's already a relief for some people. Okay, I'm not anxious all day. I'm only anxious here and there. So the second step is then to recognize at the time of anxiety, what is going through my head? Am I thinking about, what if, or, you know, I can't stand this anymore, or so-and-so said this to me and now they probably don't want to talk to me anymore, and or I'm not looking my best and I have to go and see somebody, what are they going to think of me? I have to do a Zoom presentation, and what if I mess it up? So it's all of what thoughts are associated. That's really, really the key to it. And in therapy then, and particularly with CBT, you start to challenge those thoughts. Okay, so what's a realistic view of looking at, and what you also mentioned, Barbara, already is, well, look, if I'm thinking I'm going to mess up my Zoom presentation to a group of people, what's the worst that can happen? And then look at what is the best that can happen and try and find a middle ground. So you're trying to retrain your emotional brain not to catastrophize certain outcomes, but rather accepting them and say, well, you know, a more balanced view is this.
And I suppose in that habit of writing down as you are going through the emotions and the sensations at that time is a pattern then of spotting a trigger.
Yeah.
It can appear too. So, and by, you know, and then as that trigger reoccurs, you kind of go, oh, now hang on a second. I know what this is going to do to me.
Okay. So that's okay. So when I was telling you about the different types of anxiety, like health anxiety, social anxiety, there's also anxiety about anxiety. Okay. Right. So that is actually a really tricky one, because some people, they've been anxious for an extended period of time, say for months or years. You know, some people are becoming anxious in their teens and never actually address it. And then they're in their mid-20s, mid-30s and start to look. So they know now, okay, when I'm doing X, I'm going to get anxious. They know that, okay? So that's my trigger. Now I'm going to get really, really anxious because I'm going to be anxious.
Oh, right. I see what you mean. So it's kind of self-perpetuating circle then that just keeps going around. Yeah.
Just to say something about that again, it's the same with panic disorder. So panic disorder comes about when anxiety exists for a long time. All of a sudden it gets more and more, it gets worse. And then your panic disorder, where some people actually get hospitalized because they're thinking they're having a heart attack. Whereas if they're in there and then the doctor says, look, you had a panic attack, you're fine, your heart is fine. But what happens is in a panic attack, it's so intense, the pain in the chest is so intense that people thinking I'm dying. So what happens when you think I'm dying? Your brain goes, I'm in danger. So the alarm system has to go off, which is your anxiety. So it's kind of going around in a circle the whole time.
Yeah, I did in my early 20s have a panic attack once. I've only ever had one. And to this day, I can still see myself having it. I can still feel what it did to me. And it was the most terrifying experience ever, because I was frozen solid to the spot. The brain was churning 90 to the dozen. Physically, I couldn't move for about 2 or 3 minutes. Stood frozen to the spot. And it's definitely one of those things, having experienced it, I can say to someone out there, you know, it's not something you want to go through. Now, mine was the result of grief, and that, you know, losing someone close, and that was just how it manifested in me. But yeah, they are a terrifying experience to have, panic attacks. But those, how now, looking at how we are living at the moment, I mean, there must be people now, even age groups, now experiencing anxiety that would never, previous to all of this, it may never have featured within. And I'm, you know, and I'm thinking of younger children. Now, mine are grown now. And at times like this, I'm really glad they are, because there must be children now who are feeling the impact and are now wondering what's happening. And they don't have the words to express it.
Yeah, that's true. And so children look towards the parents or caregivers, how they behave in a certain situation, to learn from them. So if the parents are highly anxious now, that will transfer onto the child as well. So as a parent, you can instill hope in the child and discuss how you're feeling yourself and say, well, look, at the moment, I'm feeling this way. But sure, look, in another few months, we are going to do all of these things again. Or, you know, so you're trying to discuss it with your child. Depends on the age of the child. If it's a young child, I always say to parents, you know, get a child to draw their feelings, because then they don't have the words, like you say. And so I get them to lie on the floor and get wallpaper, right, upside down, and then draw the body shape, and then get the colors, and then color in all your feelings. Where, like you say, they manifest in the body. Where in the body do you feel? You know, so they're learning to understand feelings, talking about feelings, normalizing feelings. That's all I can say. That is so huge. And I know the topic here is, I think you have making friends with anxiety. That's a key. That is the key, because if you're afraid of anxiety, it will not go away. It will get worse, because your fear center will have to be activated. So how do you do that? So again, I have an example, right? I had a client who was afraid of driving his car into a car park in a shopping center, you know, indoor car park. And the reason, you know, obviously that takes a couple of sessions to tease it out, was he was afraid that he's going to, first of all, somebody's going to drive behind him and say, would you ever speed up? You know, you're holding everyone up. Secondly, he was afraid he's going to bump into one of these pillars and somebody else will say, look at that stupid driver, he can't drive, look at the state of him. So all of these thoughts, remember, the thoughts were going through his head, and he could not drive into the garage, okay? And the second thing, he was anxious, so it's social anxiety as well. He was, you know, I don't want to give too much away, but he was in a group of people that performed, and he was really, really good at it. His superior said to me, really good, but he wanted him to teach to the newer ones, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't stand in front and do it, because he thought, they're all going to say, like, you idiot, what are you doing here? Why are you showing us you're actually not really good? You know,
been there, done that. Yeah, I remember. And that is, you know, that is an amazing, an unreal feeling.
Oh, it is scary, and you get all these body sensations then, and you can't do it. So you can't do it. So how you treat that is the first one with the garage. It's kind of exposure therapy. So what we did is we discussed in session, what can you do? Drive with the car to the, say it was in Tala, right? Tala car park. Drive up there, don't drive in and come back again. What was that like for you? Next week, drive in just a little bit and back out again, and so on. And that eventually, his logical brain, the prefrontal cortex here, that is logical, and the amygdala, the emotional center, you have to feed it new information. So he's gone, okay, so it's actually okay, I can drive in here. He believed he could drive in here. And he was eventually driving in after 3 sessions. He was parking his car. Equally, with the social anxiety, he started off doing just 5-minute exposure to teaching and see how that was, and telling himself, no, actually, I'm good enough, I can do this. And then after 5 minutes, the others came up to him and said, that was really good, you know, well done, I really enjoyed your class. And that boosted him. So he bought into it, and he could do 10 minutes. And before he knew it, he was fine. And he had overcome the anxiety. But I learned from my clients as well, and I just want to share that with you. What I learned from him was, he said, you know, Susie, my anxiety is now called Amy. And Amy is coming with me everywhere, and she's watching me. And since he's done that, he's never had anxiety again. And when it becomes anxious, he says, it's only Amy. Yes, she's fine.
So he put it, okay, anxiety, it's there. And it's kind of, because I accepted it was part of me and I named it. And by naming it, like you give it its own identity. It was kind of, yeah, we're going now. So if you're there, I know you're there, and whatever. So you actually free up that space mentally.
Yeah, you're not afraid anymore.
You're not afraid. Yeah,
that works for him. That doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's it. And everybody will find their own space with which to cope with it. But before we finish up today, what would you say to someone now who watches who's either watching now or watching later on replay? You know, first thing to do, you mentioned earlier about writing it down and then seeing what's going on in your mind at that point in time. And from there, what would be the next thing then that they could do? Is it like sit with it, or just acknowledge it's happening, or what would be the next step?
Okay, so before I go into that, I just want to make a really important point what not to do, okay?
To do, absolutely, because we were talking about this earlier on. Sorry, absolutely.
This is really important. There's so much information out there what to do when you're anxious, and unfortunately, it's not helpful. Anxiety wants you to be afraid of it. So some people say, well, when you're anxious, start breathing. Okay, start breathing. When in the height of anxiety, you go breathe in, breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. So what happens then is your amygdala goes, okay, so when Barbara is anxious and scared, she starts breathing. So next week you're anxious and you go breathe, 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 and your brain goes, oh, there's danger, Barbara is scared, there must be something to worry about, and gets you more anxious. So the breathing helps maybe once or twice. It will bring it down. It's like putting out a little bit of a fire in a bushfire. You're putting it out, but it's not going to work long term, because your brain is starting to remember every time Barbara breathes, she's anxious, so therefore there's danger, so therefore we must go into fight or flight. Okay, so that's really important to remember. What does work is accepting it, like I said, sit with it, go, I'm anxious. Now I'm feeling anxious. Where am I feeling it? In my tummy, in my head, this is what's going on. Writing down the thoughts, what in that moment is making you anxious. Are those reasonable thoughts? Are they maybe, I have a whole list for my clients. Is it catastrophizing you're doing? Have you any evidence that this is going to happen? What's the worst possible outcome? What's the best possible outcome? And what's the most realistic outcome? More than likely going to happen. Are you mind reading? You know, sometimes we mind read and get anxious. We predict the future. You know, worry is another one. We worry. Worry is sometimes disguised as thinking. Okay, I have to worry in order to solve a problem. Worry does not solve a problem. Worry makes you anxious. So if you want to solve a problem, take some time, sit down, think about it, and then come up with a solution or postpone it. But don't go all day in a circle about trying to problem solve that haven't even arisen yet. Okay, so there's a whole other talk in that. But so, it's to really accept the anxiety, identify it in your body, write down the thoughts, and come up with other thoughts. And again, it depends. Is it now social anxiety? Is it a phobia? There's different treatments then that you would have to go and seek help from a therapist.
And I suppose, see, that's the thing, really. When you write something down, you can come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't write it down, you're actually just going to keep churning it and going over and over and over and over. Whereas if you write it down, which is something that I would always say to even any of my own coaching clients, and I know within coaching, I'm not going into the same amount of detail or whatever that you do as a psychotherapist, obviously. But it is one of the things I'd say that when you write it down, if you're still, you can go back to it, you can open it later on if you feel like worrying about it again or feeling anxious about it again. Exactly. But the fact that you've actually put it out of your head onto something where you can return to it rather than holding onto it and churning over it.
Yeah. But especially with the thoughts, if you're catastrophizing, predicting a future that you don't have any idea if it's going to happen or not, and you're writing it down, you're engaging your logical brain with the writing down, and then you can look at it objectively and say, well, is this reasonable? Is this actually a reasonable thought? Another thing, just to squeeze it in here, is mindfulness. Mindfulness has been shown to decrease anxiety. It's shown to decrease the amygdala, and with MRI scans and all that. That if you do mindfulness, you can't actually be anxious, because when you're in the present moment, you can't be anxious because anxiety lives in the future. All right. So if I'm thinking about future events, I get anxious. But when I'm thinking about, okay, now I'm eating my meal, or I'm having a shower, or I'm, whatever, I'm reading my book, you try and bring yourself to the present moment. And practicing mindfulness is not like meditation, where some people get scared of it. Mindfulness is just being in the moment and noticing the things that are around you. Notice everything that's here when you're going for a walk. Notice the trees, the birds, all of that. That helps you with anxiety as well in the long run.
Absolutely, and certainly over the last few months, I noticed something that I have been really conscious about doing and being mindful of what I'm at, where, especially I have had somebody who's moved home, but they've been away like for 3 or 4 years. I needed mindfulness to bring me into the now. So is that my, any anxieties I felt, because, I'm now getting to know a new adult, really, because they have left and they've come back. So they're their whole own person. But I have to say, Susie, I know this is one topic, definitely, that we could sit here all day and talk about it. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I know anybody, okay, no comments have come in. We do have viewers there. It's also one of those topics that I know people, sometimes they're not comfortable putting in a comment, but I have, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, I did have the link to your website is there if anybody wants to get in touch. And if anybody wants any information, please, don't let it take over you. And this is personal experience. Don't end up where you're at the point where you have a panic attack, because trust me, it is not somewhere you want to get to. So Susie, thank you so much for today. And to everybody out there, I shall see you all next week. And I think next week we are talking about carers. And I will have a carer on here with me next week. So to everybody, cheerio and see you all then. Susie, thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.